The girl had just stepped out of the water when she suddenly noticed her legs covered in blood. Confused and frightened, she turned around only to see everyone else screaming and racing towards shore. Their legs too were stained, a horrifying red, and the lake near the shore had completely turned to blood. Something terrifying was lurking beneath the surface. A boy was just a moment too slow, and in an instant, a powerful force dragged him underwater. It turned out the lake was infested with mutated flesh-eating lampreys. These creatures didn't just live in the lake. They began appearing everywhere around town, even swimming up pipes into pools and people's houses. Just days earlier, a city worker named Ted had been inspecting the drainage pipes. He noticed a lamprey swimming in the water and immediately bent down and grabbed it. Just then he answered a call from his wife, but as soon as he hung up, the lamprey suddenly bit hard into his arm. Ted desperately struggled, eventually ripping it off, but then even larger lampreys surged toward him from the water. Terrified, Ted collapsed to the ground as several lampreys latched onto his body. An especially large one leaped onto his head, and with a series of horrifying screams, Ted was dragged helplessly into the water. Meanwhile, by a nearby creek, an elderly man was peacefully sitting with his dog. Suddenly, lampreys attacked again. One jumped right out of the water and latched onto the old man's eyeball. His dog panicked, barking wildly and running away in fear, watching helplessly as his owner was pulled beneath the water's surface. These bizarre incidents quickly drew the government's attention. Several fisheries biologists arrived at the lake to investigate and discovered 2 dead lampreys washed ashore. Michael, one of the biologists, worried that missing townspeople might be linked to these deadly creatures. To protect the public, he proposed to Mayor Ackerman that they immediately shut the dam's water valves, preventing the lampreys from swimming downstream and endangering more tourists. But Mayor Ackerman dismissed the idea, reminding Michael it was peak tourist season. Water activities were the town's biggest moneymaker. Closing the valves would mean a huge financial loss. He even doubted lampreys posed any real threat to visitors and quickly left the scene completely unconvinced. Yet just moments after Ackerman departed, a massive swarm of lampreys poured downstream through the drainage pipes. At that very moment, tourists were happily splashing in the lake, completely unaware of the approaching nightmare. Only when Michael's daughter Nicole emerged from the lake and noticed her own legs covered in blood did she realize something sinister lurked beneath the surface. Instantly, the tourists erupted in screams, frantically running towards safety. As the water near shore turned deep crimson, those who moved too slowly quickly became food for the ravenous lampreys beneath the waves. Nicole quickly called her father Michael to tell him what happened. Normally, lampreys wouldn't attack humans directly, so the only explanation was that they'd mutated. Will immediately sent Richie to investigate the scene, but Richie didn't take it seriously at all. Instead, Richie relaxed on a boat, even cracking open a beer, planning to enjoy his afternoon. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a lamprey jumped from the water and bit deep into Richie's arm. He toppled into the lake, struggled briefly, then went completely still. By the time Michael and Will arrived, all they saw was Richie's overturned boat surrounded by blood. They tried flipping the boat over to see if Richie was trapped underneath, but suddenly a lamprey lunged at Will. Michael rushed over to help, but the vicious lamprey had already sunk its teeth deep into Will's arm. Michael quickly pulled a knife from his pocket and finally managed to pry the creature off. Just then, Will got a call from a colleague. Richie's body had been found downstream and taken to the morgue. Michael and Will immediately raced to the morgue, calling the coroner along the way, urgently instructing him not to begin the autopsy until they arrived, but their warning came too late. While still on the phone, the coroner noticed Richie's body twitching. Horrifyingly, a lamprey burst right out of Richie's stomach and attacked him. The coroner fought desperately, but there wasn't just one lamprey inside Richie. More began spilling out, overwhelming him. Unable to escape, the coroner was quickly killed. Hearing his screams, Michael sensed the worst and rushed inside to find the coroner already dead. He saw lampreys slithering away through the drains, heading straight into the town's water pipes. Michael realized with dread, if the lampreys entered people's houses through the plumbing, it would be a disaster. Understanding how dangerous the situation had become, Michael immediately called Mayor Ackerman to the morgue. When Ackerman arrived and witnessed the horrifying scene, even he was shocked. But despite seeing the carnage firsthand, he still refused Michael's urgent request to shut down all water activity and the town's water supply. Ackerman insisted the lampreys couldn't possibly be that dangerous, and his bigger fear was losing tourist money. Frustrated and disgusted by Ackerman's greed and stubbornness, Michael knew he had to warn residents another way. So he contacted the local TV station and broadcast a live warning, urging everyone to stay away from water sources. When Mayor Ackerman saw Michael on TV, flew into a rage. Ackerman immediately drove over, furiously confronted Michael, yelled at him publicly, and fired him on the spot. However, Ackerman never imagined his karma would arrive so quickly. As soon as he returned office, he rushed straight to the bathroom, but he had no idea lampreys had already crawled up through the plumbing and into his toilet. Suddenly, Ackerman felt a sharp pain. By the time he tried to escape, it was already too late. He ended up dying right there in the bathroom. Meanwhile, Michael's young neighbor Ellen stepped into her pool ready for a swim, but the moment she dove underwater, Lampreys attacked her viciously. Moments later, Michael's daughter Nicole arrived at the pool with her boyfriend Alex. Just as they were getting comfortable, they suddenly saw Ellen's lifeless body floating nearby. In a horrifying sight, a lamprey crawled right out of Ellen's mouth. Terrified, Nicole and Alex quickly scrambled back onto dry land. Seconds later, even more lampreys emerged in the pool, feeding on Ellen's body. Hearing their screams, Michael's wife Kate rushed over. The three hurried back to their house, desperate to escape, but they didn't know Michael's son Kyle was already in trouble inside. Dozens of lampreys had poured through their house's water pipes, flooding the toilet bowl until it overflowed with squirming creatures. Petrified, Kyle locked himself inside the storage room, trying to hide. At that point, every corner of town had become overrun by the lampreys. Pouring from sewer drains and plumbing fixtures, the creatures formed an unstoppable army. They attacked the townspeople mercilessly, throwing the entire community into chaos. Seeing that the situation had spiraled completely out of control, Michael raced back home with his colleagues, hoping to rescue his family and leave town immediately. Unfortunately, their route home was completely covered by countless lampreys. Marcy, driving in front, froze in panic. Instead of speeding through, she just sat helplessly in her car, unable to move. Within moments, lampreys swarmed Marcy's vehicle. When Michael and Will finally caught up, her car was already completely engulfed by the creatures. Surrounded by so many lampreys, Michael and Will were powerless to help. They watched helplessly as Marcy was eaten alive. Seeing this horrific scene, Michael and Will didn't dare stop even for a second. They slammed on the gas-crushing lampreys under their tires as they sped away. Meanwhile, back at home, the moment Nicole and her mom Kate arrived safely, Nicole's boyfriend, Alex, decided he needed to check on his own family. But right after Nicole said goodbye to Alex and stepped back inside, she discovered Kate was trapped in the bathroom, surrounded by dozens of lampreys, while searching for Kyle. Afraid Nicole might also be attacked, Kate desperately shouted for her daughter to run, but Nicole refused to abandon her mother. She grabbed a toilet plunger and began beating back the lampreys. She then handed her mom a plugged-in curling iron before finding an even sharper tool herself. With one swift strike, Nicole took out a lamprey, inspiring Kate to join the fight too. Together, mother and daughter battled fiercely, finally escaping the bathroom unharmed. But neither realized Kyle was actually hiding upstairs in the storage room. Thinking Kyle might have gone outside, Kate sent Nicole to hide in the shed, while she herself hurried down to the lake Kyle often visited. There she discovered two horribly mutilated bodies half-eaten by lampreys. Before she could even react, a swarm of lampreys rushed toward her. Kate quickly grabbed a fuel container, poured gasoline all over the ground, and lit it on fire, burning dozens of lampreys in an instant. But Nicole's hiding place turned dangerous as well. Lampreys suddenly appeared on the shed's skylight, smashing through the glass and dropping inside. In a moment of desperation, Nicole spotted a lawnmower, grabbed it, and rushed outside, slaughtering lampreys left and right as she ran. Kate quickly returned, pouring gasoline again, and creating a wall of flames, temporarily holding back the creatures. At that very moment, Michael finally arrived home with Will. He quickly realized Kyle was trapped upstairs, but the entire house was crawling with lampreys, forcing them to climb up from outside. Without a ladder, reaching Kyle was nearly impossible. Even worse, several lampreys had already broken through the damaged pipes into Kyle's storage room, forcing him to fight them off desperately with a bat. Just as things looked hopeless, Alex returned, explaining that his family had safely escaped town, and he'd come back specifically to help Nicole. Luckily, Alex had a ladder in his car. Using it, they quickly rescued Kyle from danger. Afterward, everyone piled into a car, desperately trying to flee the town. However, Michael decided he needed to shut off the town's water supply to prevent an even greater disaster. For safety, he and Will chose to handle this alone, dropping off their family at a safe location, far from any water. But before anyone could breathe easy, a huge electrical tower suddenly collapsed behind them, nearly crushing everyone. The culprits turned out to be the lampreys themselves, which had broken through underground pipes and emerged onto the streets. But fortunately, the creatures didn't last long. They were quickly electrocuted by the high-voltage wires. Witnessing this, Michael had an idea. They could kill every single lamprey using the nearby power station. The key was lamprey liver, which released a scent capable of attracting other lampreys. All they had to do was use these livers to lure every creature into the power station's tunnels, and then fry them with a massive electrical surge. Determined, they quickly gathered as many livers as possible, drove to the power station, and tossed them down into a large shaft below. They waited nervously for the lampreys to gather, ready to flip the switch and send thousands of volts surging through the tunnels. But suddenly, disaster struck again. While checking if the lampreys had arrived, Will slipped and fell down the shaft. Michael desperately tried to save him, but it was too late. Will vanished beneath a swarm of lampreys. With no choice left, Michael climbed back up, yelling urgently, "Flip the switch now!" After a frantic moment, Alex finally found the switch and activated the power. Instantly, the enormous electric current surged through the tunnels, killing every lamprey in a flash of sparks and smoke. After surviving this horrific ordeal, the family hugged each other in relief. They believed the nightmare was finally over, and they became heroes for saving the town. But one day, as a cleanup worker cleared out the water plant, a surviving lamprey suddenly leaped out and attacked him, a chilling reminder that perhaps the nightmare wasn't truly finished.